Hey guys, welcome back. This is No Trade Clause coming back at you guys for another episode. This is our sixth installment of our podcast. This time, Aram has been gracious enough to join me on this podcast, so it's just going to be the two of us kind of tag team in this one. We're glad to be back in the midst of a pretty crazy playoffs we're seeing here in 2021 so far. So we're going to discuss the four series that are currently kind of going on in each conference. Four series total for the playoffs. And then a little bit later on, we want to get into the NBA awards. So basically, who have won the five awards that have been announced so far, or I think it's four awards. So me and Aram are going to kind of discuss our ballots as far as who we selected for those awards, and then take a look at who actually won these awards, and take a look at some of the storylines that lie behind some of the guys who've won it so far. Nikola Jokic, as of the time of this recording, just won yesterday. So that was a really cool story, and we definitely want to get into that and kind of how, that's a little bit of a departure from who we've seen win the MVP in prior years here. But that's basically going to be the gist of what we're discussing on this episode. So without further ado, Aram, why don't you say we get into the Eastern Conference Series for the second round that we've seen so far. There's definitely a lot we can get into here, but we want to start with this Hawks and Sixers. This series has been pretty fun to watch. I mean, you have a star in the making, Trae Young, going out here and really making a name for himself in these playoffs. And on the other side, you have an established star already in Joel Embiid, just absolutely demolishing the front line of the Hawks so far, making his presence known, and kind of showing as to why he was definitely capable of winning the MVP award. It was just a matter of his health and availability that kind of factored into that. So as of tonight, our recording here on June 9th, there's been two games played so far in this series. It's split 1-1. And we've had some pretty crazy performances. And then last night was a really cool, pretty much predicament or situation that occurred, because basically you had some guys kind of come out of nowhere for the Sixers and really produce for them. So, Aram, jumping into you here for a second, man. Like, what has been kind of your big takeaways from the series so far? Like, anything been standing out to you, or anything that you unexpected that's been going on this series so far that you really didn't see coming going into the series?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, this is a great series. It's looking like a close one right from the beginning. We saw some crazy stuff happen in game one, obviously. I haven't had a chance to rewatch game two, or because I didn't get to catch it live, so I didn't get to watch game two. But obviously, we can talk about the stats from that game as well. But just going off game one, Hawks just started taking over the game as soon as the bench came in for the Hawks against the Philly bench. So the Hawks bench was really strong right from the beginning. Kevin Huerter was great for them, as well as the rest of their group as well. And just the Philly reserves couldn't hang with them. So the Hawks were dominating throughout the game up until the very end, where sort of you saw the inexperience of their team kind of catch up to them, where they were up probably about 10 points with just a few minutes left, and sort of blowing that lead to careless turnovers and getting pressured by the Philly full court trap and full court defense. You just saw kind of inexperience some of those guys have on the Hawks team, but hopefully they learn from that game and could use it in their future games. Philly obviously had the upper hand in game two. They sort of dominated them. They sort of switched up the defender on Trae Young. So I think in game one, primarily they had Danny Green on Trae Young, and he was kind of couldn't hang with him, kind of slow, couldn't go through screens. So they kind of switched it up and had Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle mostly handling Trae Young in game two, and seemed to have worked for them. Mm-hmm. I don't have Trae Young's stats for game two pulled up in front of me, but it seemed to have worked well for them.
Definitely, Aram. I mean, Trae Young's stats for game two here, basically, he ended up with 21 points still, but, it took him 16 shots to get there. So he was 6 of 16 on the night for game two. And then, that was definitely a huge development that came about from the side of the Sixers. So for that second game, putting Ben Simmons on Trae Young from the opening jump, and then kind of alternating between him and Thybulle really made life a lot tougher on Trae Young. So basically, as you mentioned before, Danny Green has problems with foot speed. Trae Young is so shifty. He has so many moves in his bag. And I watched a breakdown before game two where they basically, a guy on YouTube broke down all of Trae Young's baskets from game one, his 35 points. And, he has a really great go-to move. It's a through the legs from left to right, and then he immediately explodes after that move, and it catches a lot of people off guard because when you're going against a guy and he goes through the legs, that's usually more of like a size up move just to kind of try to get your bearings straight and figure out what the defender is going to do. But Trae Young is really good about kind of exploding right off of that move and catching guys kind of sleeping, so to speak. So, the fact that they moved Ben Simmons onto him early in game 2, and then basically, Ben kind of swarmed him with his length and really made life a lot more difficult for him. It really showed in the numbers for this game. So Trae Young was way less efficient. He still had 11 assists. And, he drained only 1 3-pointer, though, in this game, as opposed to the multiple 3-pointers he had in game 1. So, the Sixers game plan definitely worked. But what I wanted to touch on here for the Sixers, I think that also requires a little bit of discussion, is the play of Shake Milton. He came out, in that game, and he was really incredible in that third quarter. They went with Tyrese Maxey in the first half, just to give him a shot and see what he can do. His game wasn't really flowing. His shot wasn't falling. So they went with Shake Milton in the second half of that game, and he really paid dividends. He hit 4 threes last night, 4 of 5 from deep, and ended up with 14 points in 14 minutes of play. So, Shake Milton has had a kind of like an up and down year. His minutes have fluctuated with Maxey, but I think he's really starting to catch his stride in this series. Last night was a coming out party for him in the postseason. And this is a huge development because the Sixers have been a little bit lacking as far as their bench depth. I remember from game 1, you mentioned that the Hawks bench really outscored the Sixers bench. That's exactly what happened in game 2 up until Shake Milton came in and kind of stemmed the tide for them. So that's definitely a point of emphasis for both teams. Something we need to keep an eye on because, bench play, even in the playoffs, is essential. B-Stars can't play the whole game. The minutes leader for the Sixers was Tobias Harris at 36 minutes. And, that leaves a lot of minutes on the table for other guys to step up. And luckily, Milton was, ready to step up. And then for the Hawks, it was Kevin Huerter, that stepped up and, really made his mark on the game with 3 3-pointers of his own and 20 points and then 21 from Gallinari. So bench play has kind of been like the turning point, and there's been a lot of X factors in the series. So we got to definitely look past the stars and those guys, the starters, when we're looking for production and who can potentially swing a game from either end.
Yeah, for sure. All great points. You mentioned Kevin Huerter and Gallinari. They're leading the Hawks currently in like 3-point shooting in the series. Trae Young is taking more threes and making less threes than them. So both Kevin Huerter and Gallinari have made 3 threes per game in this series, shooting at 55%, which is a really good percentage. Obviously, it's 2 game sample size, so it doesn't mean much, but we'll see how that goes for the rest of the series. But it's a great start from them. And then you have Trae Young, who's only made 2.5 threes per game. You mentioned the week game 2 that he had, making only 1 3, and he's shooting them at 28% for the series so far. So definitely inefficient shooting for Trae Young so far in these first 2 games. But hopefully if the other guys can step up, including Bogdanovic, who's done a decent job so far as well, but shooting at 40% from 3 for the series. But we'll see how these Hawks do in game 3 back at home.
Yeah, and one other point about the Hawks here so far. I mean, it's a shame that they're going through this series without the services of DeAndre Hunter. Another breakout player for them, and I think he was going to be in the mix for most improved player earlier in the season before he had that knee injury. And it was just announced today that he's actually going to be out for the remainder of the playoffs with a torn meniscus, and that's really interesting because Joel Embiid tore his meniscus in the prior series, yet he's playing on here, not only playing but flourishing. So what that tells us is there's different varying degrees of a meniscus tear, and unfortunately for the Hawks, it looks to be a little bit more severe than the one Joel Embiid is going through. But that really costs the Hawks as far as their defensive depth. Hunter is definitely the guy that they task with taking on the best perimeter player from the opposing team. So in, the situation of this series, he probably would have been tasked with slowing down Tobias Harris, for the other side, and not having him and having to put Bogdanovic on Tobias Harris and potentially Huerter at times. It definitely hurts them from that end. And it allowed, Tobias to kind of get going early in the last game. He ended up with 22 points. And I want to say a lot of those were in the first half. When he absolutely dominated that front line of the Hawks. So something else we definitely need to keep an eye on. It's really a shame that Hunter can't play in this series because he's been great this season, and I really hope that he can kind of continue to expand upon the growth that he showed this season, because he's going to be another very vital cog in the development for the Hawks. And I think it's a sign that the Hawks are going to be around for a long time because they have other pieces that haven't quite reached their potential yet.
100% agree with you. I think DeAndre Hunter's stock rose this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is his second year in the league, right? Not third.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's his second year in the league. So as a rookie, he was kind of slow to get off the ground, but really picked up in his second year. And what's surprising to me is, like, I think he was out for a couple of weeks at the end of the regular season, and then tried to come back from a knee injury, and then played in the first round a little bit, and then just couldn't, even after the long break that the Hawks had after beating the Knicks in 5, just couldn't make it back for round 2. I guess he re-aggravated it or made it worse, so they called him out for the season.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but the thing about the Hawks is they have plenty more to go. This team has not reached its potential, its ceiling, and they haven't topped out yet. So that's the cool thing about it. But we'll see what these teams have in store for Game 3. Interestingly enough, they get 2 days off between 2 and 3, and they get another 2 days off between 3 and 4. So
really?
No excuses between these two squads when it comes to rest. They got to be 100% because you're getting more breaks than some of the other teams in these playoffs here so far. So let's move on to Nets Bucks. I mean, this is a series with no shortage of star power. Even down a player in James Harden from the Nets side, it's still been an incredible show to watch, especially in Game 2, where the Nets came out here firing on all cylinders. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, I mean, these guys are absolutely unstoppable when they're firing 100% capacity. And I don't know if you saw this stat, Ron, but I saw the other day, I think it was yesterday, that Kevin Durant is shooting 50% on contested jump shots here. I can't remember if that's the playoffs or the whole season, but he's shooting, I think, the highest percentage contested shots than anyone else so far. So that just goes to show you he's just a different animal. And so far, the Bucks don't have an answer. So if you're going to look at this series from a wide angle view, would you say it's more of the Nets just offensive dominance is carrying them to these 2 wins so far, or are the Bucks kind of leaving a lot on the table in terms of their game plan and how they're trying to scheme for the Nets?
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, going back to Kevin Durant, he's definitely playing like the best player on the planet, which he can be, and which he was at a certain time before the Achilles, in my opinion. But yeah, 50% on uncontested or on contested jumpers, and the percentage of jumpers that he takes, which are contested, are at a league high as well. So I think over 80% of his jumpers are contested jumpers, and he's making them at a crazy rate. So definitely just an unstoppable player in every respect. But in terms of looking at the series from an outside perspective, whether it's the Nets who are dominating on the offensive end or just the Bucks having too many weaknesses, I picked the Nets to win in 6. I think it's looking like a good bet so far. I do see the Bucks probably picking up 1 or 2 wins, but I see the Nets definitely closing it out, probably in 6. We'll see how the rest of the series goes. But honestly, if the Bucks just look like they can't stop the Nets, so it's kind of like a your turn, my turn with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, and then just the role players around them are also playing amazing. Mike James, Blake Griffin, Joe Harris, they're all playing fantastic in this series. I think Blake Griffin has kind of been a revelation ever since LaMarcus Aldridge went down with his retirement, obviously, with his heart condition. But I think Blake Griffin has really picked up the slack in this series.
Blake was thinking he was done. Now he's talking like it's almost like Lob City again, the Clippers.
Exactly. Let me just give you Blake Griffin's stats so far in the series. So he's shooting 60% from the field on 9 field goal attempts per game. He's making 2.5 threes per game in this series at 45%. Both great percentages from the field and from 3. He's getting 11 rebounds per game, and he has 13 points per game. So that's more than what you can expect from what we thought was a washed-up Blake Griffin coming out of Detroit.
Absolutely. I mean, when he was in Detroit, I mean, it seemed like he wouldn't take any shots within the arc. It was almost
so true.
Pointers. It just seemed like he didn't have any kind of energy or burst in his step. I don't know if he was just playing possum, if he just wanted out so bad, he wanted to like tank his value. But In any case, yeah, it's been an incredible development. Very important for the Nets since they're without the services of Jeff Green right now with an injury. Blake Griffin has stepped into the void and been absolutely fantastic in his role, seamlessly kind of transitioning from a star role into a reserve role, which for some players is really difficult. But for Blake, it's been very easy. He comes in as like a secondary playmaker at times if he wants to be from the low block. He's still a fairly adequate post scorer. Doing a good job of D'ing up Giannis. He has a lot of strength, which he utilizes in the post and keeps Giannis kind of out of that sweet spot that he likes to get to. And then from three, like you mentioned, 2.5 threes a game for Blake Griffin. So that shooting touch has been there for a few years now. That's nothing new from his perspective, but he's very solid as a stretch big. And then it's really interesting and weird because you look at a guy like Bruce Brown, he's like the inverse. So instead of like a stretch big, he's like an interior small. It's like he just changes the whole formula of like what a guy his size is supposed to do. So at 6'4", he's getting all these rebounds. He gets offensive rebounds. He's really good on the short roll, I've noticed. If the Bucks are going to blitz somebody like KD or Kyrie off the screen and roll, you have a guy like Bruce Brown that rolls right into like the free throw line and gets the ball. And then from there, he can either hit a floater or he can make reads from that kind of like right outside the restricted area to the corners. If somebody's cutting from baseline, I mean, he's a really good passer, which he's demonstrated so far. So I think, we look at all the pieces of the Nets and they fit together so well beyond just the stars. And it's crazy to think that this is without a guy, Bruce, Spencer Dinwiddie, that's hasn't played pretty much all year. So imagine if he was playing. It's just an embarrassment of riches right now for the Nets offensively.
And James Harden.
I mean, incredible, man.
It's really, really, truly incredible. I think the Nets, not that I don't think that they're better without Harden. I do think that they're more of a kind of free-flowing offense without Harden because, I think Harden becomes a primary ball handler with the Brooklyn Nets when he's on the floor. And he's sort of more like he's learned it from the Houston style of like obviously taking a lot of dribbles, like controlling the offense in his own way, which obviously is a great offense. It's just more sticky offense. It's not as beautiful to watch as you see with like Kyrie and Kevin Durant and like kind of just using the entire team for the whole offense. So I think they're kind of a more fun team to watch without Harden, but obviously when he comes back, and hopefully he comes back soon, they'll be great to watch even then.
Yeah, it seems like from reports that Steve Nash and the team, they're saying that Harden, they expect to have him back at some point, but we're not exactly sure what that's going to be. So, for Game 3, he's going to be out for this one, but they're hoping he's going to come back at some point. But in the meantime, it's not like they're hurting to have him back. You go back and look at the final score from the last game, and, it was a margin of 39 points. And at one point, it was 49 points. So definitely not what we expected going into a game that, we thought all these games would be highly contested, come down to the final buzzer. But, with looking at the Nets and their production, it's just really incredible. Like everybody's firing on all cylinders, as we mentioned before. They have really good, capable bench players. Mike James, a really nice pickup. Was he a 10-day pickup, I think, during the season that was converted to a rest of season contract?
That's true. Yep, that's right. I think he signed like either 1 or 2 10 days with the Brooklyn Nets, and then they converted him to a rest of season contract. Yeah. So I think he's a restricted free agent this offseason.
Gotcha. That's really incredible value for a guy that, literally just like, hey, just come in and we don't really need you, but, we're going to give you a shot to see what you got. And, he's made the most of that opportunity. So, for a guy like Mike James, he's strong. He's got a lot of, he has a lot of basketball IQ. He's not afraid to take big shots. He can let it fire from deep. He's just a fearless player. Nothing phases him. So I think that's what stands out to me most about Mike James. And, 10 points last game, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Only shot 4 of 12 from the field, but he made 2 threes of his 4 attempts. And, just a solid guy all around, especially for, that kind of investment. Or a contract that initially wasn't even supposed to last the whole season. So really incredible on their end. From the Bucks perspective, they got to figure out something fast. Down 2-0 to, the best offense in NBA history. And, I think Giannis definitely has to take some blame for this one. He took a lot of jumpers last game that were with like 13 or 14 seconds left on the shot clock. Got away from the menace he was in the paint from the previous series against Miami. Chris Middleton, couldn't hit a shot to save his life in the first half. He started off like 0 for, I want to say 6 or 7 from the field, and that's not going to get it done. So it starts with those guys, but I think missing DiVincenzo hurts them a lot too, because now Connaughton and Forbes have to play more minutes, and they're just not equipped, on the defensive end of the ball to do really anything of consequence. They're getting schemed out. They're getting identified. They're getting exposed. So I think it's a trickle-down effect from losing DiVincenzo, and then also their starters haven't been up to snuff so far. The scoring has really been a struggle. PJ Tucker's being ignored. They're going to let him fire away and load up on Giannis and Chris Middleton and Holiday. So I think there's still some possibilities left to explore, especially if Giannis can get a little more aggressive and get back to the paint where he makes his money. But I'm not sure. I'm with you. I think the Nets win in 6, and hopefully it goes that long, because at this rate, they're in danger of losing in less than that. So we'll see.
Very true. Yeah, very true. I think it starts with like the top end talent with the Bucks, with Giannis and Middleton specifically. Giannis shooting 20% from the line so far, so he's got to improve there. And then the Middleton shooting 30% from the field so far. He's got to improve there big time.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Giannis's free throw struggles. I think that is particularly troubling, just looking at, how much he's fouled, how much they rely on him to generate the kind of offense, when everything else kind of stalls and they're just looking for some points. Right. Going to last game, he was 8 of 15. So, you're leaving points at the line. For last game, it wouldn't have made a difference. They still lost by an incredible margin. But it's got to start there. You got to get the easy points and then kind of work out from there. So he's getting a lot of criticism right now. People are saying like he shouldn't have signed the extension, and he's not a guy you can win a championship with and build around. I think that remains to be seen, but it's definitely concerning that this is another postseason where he just runs into a wall. It's not like he hits a point and he's still kind of chugging along and has to grind it out. It's just like everything just comes to a stop. So that's troubling, and it's very troubling because I thought this would be a team that he would feast on, because they don't have defenders like Kawhi Leonard or Danny Green from years past. Last year with Jimmy Butler and Bam, there's no one like that. KD is a good defender, I think, but I wouldn't call him elite. And they don't have a rim protector, really. Blake is good, but he's not the kind of guy that's going to protect the rim like that. So I'm concerned from Giannis's perspective. Hopefully he can turn it around for Game 3, because they need him in a big way right now.
Yep, 100%. We saw what the Hawks and the Wizards were doing to Ben Simmons at the end of the game in clutch time. Like, they're just fouling him, like knowing that he's going to make 1 out of 2 at best for the most part. So when it comes to like clutch time, if it ever comes to clutch time in this Bucks Nets series, like Giannis is going to have to watch out for those intentional fouls, I think. Yeah,
absolutely, man. It comes down to the last 2 minutes. You can't do it past the 2-minute mark, but that's plenty of time to cut into a lead or gain an advantage just from Giannis missing 1 of 2 or something.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but if he has the ball in his hands, they can't foul him, right? I think it's only when it's off the ball that they can't grab him intentionally in the last 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah. I think that's about right. Yeah. So we'll see, man. But this series hasn't lived up to the billing yet, but there's still time. There's still time for the Bucks to turn it around. They're at home, so I'm hopeful that they turn it around here pretty soon. So for the third series we're going to look at here, we're going to shift over to the Western Conference. So this is going to be the Suns-Nuggets matchup. That's been really interesting to watch. Just kind of looking at so far through the series, what's really cool is that, basically, the Suns backcourt has been super dynamic, and Devin Booker is taking the chance to kind of burst onto the scene, the national scene, and get even more recognition. But the biggest strength for Phoenix, looking at their perspective first, is just the depth. They come at you at waves. It could be Jay Crowder. It can be Mikal Bridges, then Booker, then Ayton. And Ayton's been so great so far, especially defensively. Like, he barely even fouled last game. I think he maybe had like 1 foul against Jokic. if only Nurkic could have done that in the Blazers series. He fouled out almost every game. So, he's doing something that Nurkic obviously couldn't. But that's the biggest takeaway for me so far is the play of Ayton. He's come a long way on defense. He used to be in deer in headlights, but he's starting to figure it out. So, for this series, who did you pick going in? Did you have the Suns kind of continuing their role? Did you think Jokic would be able to kind of take over from the Nuggets perspective? Like, what was your initial kind of prediction for this one?
Okay, so I don't think I made an official prediction on this series, but I did think in my head, I'm not sure if I tweeted this or not. I don't think I did, but I think I was thinking in my head, like, don't sleep on the Nuggets in this series. So I think if it came down to me making an official prediction, not based off what I saw in game one, but I would probably go like Suns in 7, going the stretch all the way to game 7. And then obviously Phoenix will be at home. So I'll pick them to win game 7. So I think it's going to be a close series. Obviously on one end, you got the MVP and Jokic with his supporting cast without Jamal Murray. They did well against the Blazers. That was a close series. Probably should have gone 7. But I do like the way they played in that series. And then with Phoenix taking down the Lakers, obviously the Lakers battled some injuries. And I tweeted about how actually up until Davis had his injury, that it was literally a 50-50 series pretty much. So should have gone to 7. And then obviously anything can happen in game 7. Right. So I think of this as a really close series, but I'll take the Suns in 7 in this series. What about you?
I think I picked the Suns in 6 in this series. So, it could definitely end up going the distance. I wouldn't be surprised if it does. Both teams have a lot to offer, put on the table. For the Nuggets, I think they're getting the services of Will Barton back tonight, if all goes well with his hamstring in warmups and everything like that. So that's definitely going to give them an edge and definitely more perimeter depth that they've been sorely lacking in this series. So far, I mean, there's only been one game played so far, but the Suns really kind of fed off of that home crowd. I mean, I talk about this a lot, like on my own podcast and things like that, but like the energy of the home crowd, in these playoffs, I think is really cool to see. It's really great to have that back. And you can just tell, like, when a team starts to feed off of that, it's like a cascade effect. So the Suns had that rolling. I think the Sixers had that rolling when their bench got them, gained them that lead. It's definitely huge, for some of these younger guys. It's, their first kind of experience with home crowds like this, and just being able to experience that on a playoff scale is monumental. And I think a big reason why I picked the Suns is just looking at a guy like Chris Paul to kind of steady the ship, to see like what he can do from the backcourt. I think they have more options to go to in the backcourt. The depth is incredible. They have the shooting. They have the defense. They can get it done on both ends. I think they ranked top 10 in offensive and defensive efficiency this season, if I'm not mistaken. So like across the board, they don't have many weaknesses. And, it's really incredible because this team is fairly young still, with guys like Mikal Bridges and Ayton not having a ton of experience, Cam Johnson. It's a nice blend of vets and the younger guys to kind of, give the energy, but also the discipline, guys that have been there before. So, I mean, I'm definitely rooting for the Suns in this one. I want to see Chris Paul win a ring. If it's not going to be Miami that wins it this year, it's like, all right, I guess I'll go for the Suns, and because I'm a huge Chris Paul fan and I think he deserves it. So I'm going for them in this series. I think Jokic is going to be incredible. He's going to do what he does. I don't think you're really going to slow him down too much. But overall, I mean, there's not really much that the Suns leave on the table. They kind of have the entire package, and that's super impressive. And it kind of shows you as to why they almost attained the top seed in the Western Conference.
Yeah, very well said. I think the Suns are like locked and loaded, ready to go all the way to the finals pretty much. I mean, Mikal Bridges had a great first game, like 8 of 12 from the field, 4 of 8 from 3. Team's leading scorer with 23 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. So just an all-around great player, obviously making key threes at good moments. And then looking at the shot chart from game 1, the Suns made 12 out of 13 from floater range. So that's like floater / short mid-range. So that's like the likes of Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and obviously a little bit of DeAndre Ayton as well. So obviously those guys, when they're dominating like that in the short mid-range, floater range, that's like unstoppable right there. Because that's a shot that where you're not supposed to hit 12 to 13 from the field.
Right. And that was like a key point of emphasis, I think, and a lot of people took notice of that because those two players that you mentioned, they do so much damage in that mid-range area. Booker and Paul love to take those pull-up jumpers, and that's definitely an area of the floor they can exploit. Since a guy like Jokic definitely isn't going to be up at the point of the screen a lot of times, he's going to be kind of hanging back, playing drop, and that just invites shots like that. And those two guys are probably two of the best mid-range shooters you're going to see from that range. So I think that's something else that kind of tips the scales in their favor, because the mid-range shot, and I'm sure you know this better than most people, since you're deep in the analytics game. But you look at data and you look at the numbers. A lot of times people say to shy away from that shot, and ultimately that's good advice. But if you have players that can take a decent amount of those shots and be up to a certain point in efficiency, where you can hit 50 or plus % of those shots, then it becomes pretty viable because, you're hitting that consistently. I think it kind of evens out the whole equation when it comes to 2-pointers as opposed to 3-pointers. So from that perspective, I think it's a great shot. They definitely need to take it if it's available. And, Jokic is a great player, but defensively he can leave some holes, and that's one that the Suns aren't afraid to exploit.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, this whole analytics things with the 3-pointer being better than mid-range, obviously it's true because one is 3 points, one is 2 points, but that's when you're comparing an uncontested 3-point jumper and an uncontested long mid-range jumper. Obviously, you're going to opt for the 3-point jumper, which is going to give you the extra point on a very slight decrease in percentage. But then when you're looking at a contested 3-pointer versus an uncontested mid-ranger, the percentages kind of change. So if you can hit an uncontested mid-range jumper at like 60%, but a contested 3-pointer at like 20 or 25%, the mid-range option becomes a better option there.
Absolutely. So it's a whole math equation that I think, it's definitely a balancing act that teams are trying to achieve right now. But I think the Suns are doing a pretty good job of achieving that balance and just understanding like the strengths of their team. And, just kind of going down the roster, I think everybody kind of knows their roles. It starts with the guys at the top, Booker and Paul definitely lead the charge in that department. But then it just kind of trickles down from there. You go all the way down to Cameron Payne and Torrey Craig, Cam Johnson. I mean, these are all guys that know exactly what they needed to do on the floor, and they do it pretty well. I mean, Cameron Payne torched the Lakers in the last series. I mean, he was blowing by LeBron off the dribble, which is, definitely different. You wouldn't expect to see that kind of going into that series. But, Torrey Craig has been a revelation for him. 9 points, 8 rebounds, and only 17 minutes of play. Hit a couple of threes for him, playing some great defense. So all the way down the roster, I mean, they have a lot of great pieces they can utilize any given game. And they're going to hit their share of threes. They're going to play great defense. So I think that gives them a great chance to win this series. But if we shift over to the Nuggets side, I think Jokic is going to do his part. But, definitely the second cog here for that team now that Jamal Murray is out, Michael Porter Jr. He's the guy that's going to lead the charge for him. And he got off to an incredibly hot start in that final game against the Blazers in the previous series. And he's kind of carried that over for the most part, 6 of 13 shooting in game 1. And, he's going to be another primary catalyst for that team. This is his time to break out and really show what he's got. So, for Michael Porter, for Aaron Gordon, I think these two guys, they're waiting on their turn. Their time is now. But I'm definitely concerned a little bit from the Nuggets side when it comes to that bench, or at least the guys that backcourt, because Austin Rivers only had 7 points on 7 shots, and then Monte Morris only had 2 points on 10 shots. And those are two of the guys that really broke out against the Blazers. So they're going to need those guys to be who they are normally if they want to stand a chance here, because Phoenix is going to come with it from the backcourt, though. So Denver has to respond accordingly, or it'll be a short series for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you told me Facundo Campazzo was going to play 36 minutes in a playoff game at the beginning of the season, I would have thought you're crazy. So, but yeah, I mean, the Nuggets are hanging in there. Let's see what happens in Game 2 tonight. I think this is going to be a good series.
Absolutely. You got all the ingredients of a great series: star power, depth, the whole thing. So if we're looking at teams, I mean, this is a theme through the entire playoffs, but none of these teams have won a championship in the past 30 years. The team that won it most recently was the Philadelphia 76ers in 1983. So quite a long time ago. And then as we look at the final playoff series, kind of in these playoffs so far, the theme is the same for these two teams. Jazz haven't even been to the finals since '98. They don't have a championship. Same for the Clippers. Clippers have never been to a conference finals. So it's really cool to see all these teams get like their first real, have a chance to have their first real like championship run in their franchise history. It's such a cool story to see. But specifically for this series, this is fresh in our minds because the first game of the series, I believe, was last night. So you're looking at what happened in that game. I mean, it was really an incredibly riveting game. Donovan Mitchell continues to make a name for himself. I don't know what D Wade told him in that little kind of pep talk on the sideline in the middle of the game, but whatever he said worked because he had 45 points, and that's his fourth 40-point playoff game, which matches Karl Malone's total for his entire career. Blows my mind, but really goes to show you what Donovan Mitchell is doing so far in his career. And there's a lot. I have a lot of thoughts on this series, but basically it boils down to the Jazz don't have Conley. They started off terribly from in the first half as far as shooting, but on the Clippers side, the rotations were terrible. Luke Kennard played too many minutes, I think. Rondo closed the game as well, which is terrible. And then Kawhi and PG had very inefficient nights. So both teams have left stuff on the table, but both teams definitely have a lot that they can take away from game one. So, who do you think is coming out of this one? Just I know it's hard to say right now, but with the absence of Conley, do you think that's enough to kind of sway the series in the favor of the Clippers with, all the pieces they got?
Right. I think I'm going to go Jazz still. We'll see when Mike Conley comes back, but I think I'm going to go Jazz in 7. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Jazz in 7. What are you going to go? What are you going to go with?
I think I'll go with the Jazz as well in this series. I think prior to the playoffs, I believe I picked the Jazz. I think I also said 7. Okay. It comes down to this, man. Don't trust the Clippers. They haven't given us a chance, an opportunity to trust them, a reason to, since the Lob City days. I mean, even back then, they were blowing leads. They blew, a 3-1 lead. They blew a 3-1 lead last year. They got down 2-0 in the last series. They almost lost that series if it wasn't for Kawhi Leonard, going into another plane of existence. So it's just incredible to see the ways that the Clippers blow this thing, but that's basically why, or one of the main reasons why. And then the other reason is the Jazz, they're one of the only teams, I think the only team that was top five in offense and defense for the season. So you got Gobert, you got Mitchell. If Conley comes back, that's even better. But even without him, Bogdanovich, Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, just across the board, they're just loaded. They're really well coached, and they've been through a couple of playoff series before. Even Donovan Mitchell has been here multiple times before. So they kind of know the lay of the land. They know what to expect. And I think they're just mentally tougher. I think they're going to close games better. And Donovan Mitchell is going to continue to feast, especially if Reggie Jackson is going to foul out. And then Luke Kennard is trying to handle Donovan Mitchell on the perimeter. That's not going to end up well, from the Clippers side. But in any case, I think it'll be a really good series, a long series. But I think the Jazz just have they're a little bit tougher, a little bit mentally tougher. And then I think they're going to have what it takes to kind of outlast the Clippers, since they also have more rest on their hands. The Clippers played a long previous series.
Yep, great point. What was I going to say about the Jazz? Oh, yeah. So one advice I do have for the Jazz is don't lose at home. I think if they lose at home in game 2, that kind of gives Clippers the upper edge for sure. I think the Jazz's home crowd is what kind of pushes them over the edge in these kind of close games at the end. We saw how crazy the ending was in game 1. Actually, I caught the fourth quarter of that game. I didn't catch the rest because I was busy doing something else. But the fourth quarter was crazy. Obviously, close game right to the end. Paul George had a very bad night, 4 of 17 from the field. You expect more from a guy like that. And then Donovan Mitchell just reaching that elite level of basketball professionalism, like you can't imagine. He can be, if he's the best player in the series, which he is so far, then it's done. Like Kawhi and PG, if not playing as good as Donovan Mitchell, then it's done.
Absolutely. I really think that Paul George specifically is having flashbacks from 2018. You know, just going against the Jazz in that series as a member of the Thunder and getting traumatized by, losing against Donovan Mitchell, young Donovan Mitchell. Him and Westbrook were definitely humbled in that series. I went back earlier today and I looked at Paul George's numbers in Game 6 of that series, where Joe Ingles infamously got in his head, and they were drawing back and forth, and that was a whole in that game. Paul George was 2 of 16 for 5 points in that game.
5 points.
Yeah, 5 points. And then last night, I mean, he scored more, but he was 4 of 17, so his efficiency was almost the same as the last time he played the Jazz in the playoffs. So it's just a theme with Paul George. I don't know if it's something about Utah. I don't know if it was the altitude, the fatigue, or what, but this team just has a way of kind of making him just kind of shrink in the moment. And I don't care what he says at this point. He says the fans are great and the energy is there and stuff, or I wasn't healthy and this and that. He's got a lot of excuses, but at the end of the day, I don't trust Paul George to carry me through a series. He wasn't all due respect, I don't think he was the reason why they won that series against the Mavericks. I think that was more Kawhi's doing when he had that 40-plus point game to close out that series. But that's, it's a troubling trend. Paul George just has I think he has a habit of kind of falling flat when they need him. But, definitely, troubling for him. But, hey, Donovan Mitchell, not afraid of the moment. He's going to show up every time. I think he's the opposite of Paul George. I think Donovan Mitchell has a good regular season, and he takes it to another level in the playoffs. Paul George has had some really, really good regular seasons. In the postseason, he just gets exploited in some way or another. How do you feel about that comparison?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Paul George has definitely got his fair share of criticism in the playoffs, and he's got to prove us wrong for us to not talk about it anymore. But going back to the Jazz real quick, I also think we shouldn't discount what Rudy Gobert does for them. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell was fantastic in the statistical categories in Game 1. Rudy Gobert, not so much. I mean, 10 points, 12 rebounds, only 2 blocks. But, I mean, just his presence is kind of changes what the Clippers can do on the court, obviously, for the Jazz defensively. And then on that final play where Marcus Morris pump fakes and then sends Rudy Gobert flying, he jumps quite a few inches off the ground, moves to the right, and then tries to go for another shot, and then Rudy Gobert just recovers and blocks that shot. So absolutely amazing defensively.
That was really good work, moving his feet. He's quicker than he looks sometimes. He kind of surprises you, how fast he can move his body and recover and stuff like that. But I'm glad you brought up Rudy Gobert, because that serves as a great segue into our last segment, which is the NBA awards. I mentioned, this is funny because I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I said we were going to discuss the 4 awards that have been announced so far. But while we were on the air, right in the middle of this podcast, they announced the 5th award for this season. Rudy Gobert has won his 3rd consecutive Defensive Player of the Year award, which is right on time. So
right on time.
It really is. You can't beat the timing on this one. Honestly, I don't know if we're going to have time to go through all of them, but, we can definitely at least hit on this one. It's the most recent. It just happened literally 20 minutes ago. So, we're already talking about him, so might as well give him a little bit more credit for his 3rd, Defensive Player of the Year award. We haven't seen something like this since Dwight Howard was getting this done, about a decade plus ago with his exploits for the Magic. Gobert, I mean, he just checks all the boxes. Whether you're looking at the film or whether you're looking at the advanced stats, everything kind of comes together to just prove that Gobert is one of, if not the best defender in the league. It's just sometimes you can't quantify what he does, because sometimes people don't even want to take shots at the rim because Gobert's there waiting for attempts. So, some players like John Morant, it's just they don't care. But for a majority of players, if they see Gobert in their way one-on-one, they're going to shy away and they're going to try to find some other way to get a shot off. So, I mean, he's a big reason why for the past several years, the Jazz have been elite defensively. I mean, there's other factors at play, but Gobert's the guy who makes it happen. Shout out to him, just an incredible career. He's paid a lot of money, but he's worth it just because he's that good at stopping guys from getting baskets. So an incredible campaign, and he was my pick to win it. And I'm going to take a guess and say he was your pick as well for Defensive Player of the Year for our ballots.
Yeah. Yep, he absolutely was. I mean, you took words right out of my mouth. Like, it's not only the box score stuff. Yeah, he averages a lot of blocks per game, but it's also the film and like the kind of advanced stats that you don't really see on your everyday websites like NBA.com, where it's like how many percentages, how many less shots per game are teams taking at the rim on an average team compared to Rudy Gobert's team. I mean, I'm sure a lot less. So it's how he impacts the team defensively, and yeah, definitely deserving Defensive Player of the Year, obviously. And I don't think it stops next year. I mean, he's my pick next year too.
I mean, just keep picking him. Like, he's going to be in his 30s here pretty soon, and I don't see any reason for it to stop. He's not a super athletic player. He's not going to try to just wow people with his jumping ability or quickness or whatever. So I think he's going to age really gracefully. He's going to be able to do what he does for another several years, and with that should come even more awards for him. So, he's been doing what he hasn't changed his formula. Like, he just sticks to what he knows, and the team continues to try to funnel defenders towards him and just, hey, let Gobert clean it up. Let him take care of the leftovers, and he does a great job at that. So I think that was a pretty cut and dry award. I don't think anybody else had a chance at winning it. You can throw in like Ben Simmons for a little bit of consideration, Bam Adebayo, but when it comes down to just sheer impact every single night, I don't think you can do better than Rudy Gobert.
I'm curious to see if he got all the first place votes or not from the media, if he was unanimous Defensive Player of the Year. I think there's a chance he was. We'll see when the votes come out.
I'm curious to see that. I mean, the voting should be out pretty soon. I actually have it here on Twitter. I just found it. So it was not unanimous. He had 84 first place votes, 14 second place votes, and 2 third place votes. I don't know who would vote him third. It makes no sense to me, but he did have 2 third place votes. So he had 464 points total. Second place was Ben Simmons at 287, so a fair amount behind. And then Draymond Green was third with 76 points. So
it's kind of those two at the top, like sort of.
Right. Yep. But curiously enough, Bam Adebayo did get 1 first place vote. So somebody just really thought Bam was that guy for the award. So that's interesting.
Very interesting.
I'll end this conversation on this point. There's always that weird vote that's just stray vote and makes no sense. Like for MVP, somebody voted for Derrick Rose. There was like a fan vote or something like that. Contavious Caldwell-Pope got a third place vote. Just to throw that out there.
Defensive Player of the Year?
Yep. Just gotta put that on the atmosphere. It's just hilarious. Right. Like, KCP, hey, you're a good defender, man, but a little bit. Just a little.
There's always those funny ones in there for sure.
Every time, man. Every time. So let's do one more here, man. Let's get one more award out of the way. So Coach of the Year, I think this is the next most recent one as the time of our recording that came out. This created a little bit more controversy. So my pick was Monty Williams to win Coach of the Year. Tom Thibodeau ended up winning it. I'm super happy for him. I think he did a fantastic job. He was in my top 3. I think he had him. I had him second or third on my ballot. I mean, he did a great job. But I don't know. I mean, Monty just kind of. It wasn't just him, of course. There's a lot that goes into this, but I mean, almost the first seed in the West, almost the best record in the league, coming from this is their first playoff appearance in 10, 11 years. That's why he got my vote. I mean, I'm not salty or anything. Like, I think Thibodeau did a great job. I just thought Monty personally got robbed of that award. I think he was the winner here. But in any case, I think a deserving coach got it. That's really cool to see. Your thoughts on this development? Do you think?
So I feel very similarly to you. I also voted for Monty Williams on our ballots. So basically, Tom Thibodeau elevated the Knicks from bottom of the league, like pretty much, to mid-pack playoffs
Mhm.
in the East, obviously. And then you have Monty Williams, who elevated the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, Monty Williams was a coach last year too, but the jump they took from 2 years ago to last year was amazing, and then from last year to this season was amazing too.
Yeah.
So from middle of the West to basically the top of the West and almost one seed, as you mentioned. So I voted for Monty Williams just because of that top 2 seed in their conference. I think that stands for something as a coach. Whereas obviously Tom Thibodeau is also very deserving for what he's done with the Knicks this season. So
Sure.
I think the awards came out very close. I think Monty Williams had more first place votes, but Tom Thibodeau had more points overall.
Mhm.
So I mean, if they could do coach of the year, that would be amazing. But
For sure.
one has to be the winner, and it ended up being Tibbs.
Yep, that's the way it went, man. And I think another case I have for Monty is I think it's tougher to go from a good team to a great team than it is to go from bad to good.
Yeah.
That jump to get into the upper echelon is very difficult, and I think it says, like you were saying about I think it was about Thibodeau. I mean, it says a lot about you and what you're able to do with the team if you can kind of take them to maybe a championship. I mean, imagine if they win a championship, coming off of, just missing out on the playoffs last season. I think that's going to bolster his case even more, even though it is a regular season award. But, in any case, I think he did a fantastic job. They both did. I also give consideration to Steve Nash as a first-year coach. I know people are going to say, like, well, they had the big three. Like, obviously, you should have done really well. But it's not easy to coach a team of, you have a lot of egos. You have a lot of personalities. There's a lot of demand on his shoulders. And, I don't think they really even had a period in the season where it's like, this is going terribly. Like, Spoelstra had, where they started 9-8 with that Heat team. And I don't think it was ever a moment like that. And they had all the injuries and things like that. And I think he weathered the storms really well. So he's another guy I gave consideration to. Quinn Snyder. I mean, there's a lot of guys you can consider, but it just goes to show there are a lot of teams that took a jump this year, and that's a testament to the great coaching we saw.
For sure. Yeah. 2 points I'll touch on real quick. Talking about Steve Nash. I mean, they also weren't healthy all year. I mean, how often did those three play together? Not that often.
Yeah.
So definitely a lot of injuries that he had to handle and kind of work his way around those injuries. And Steve Nash did a great job. And of course, he was in consideration for me as well. And then going back to Monty Williams and Tom Thibodeau, I mean, I know this is a regular season award and the playoffs don't count, but I think where coaching really manifests itself and your coaching ability is in the playoffs and your adjustments from game to game. And we obviously we saw what happened with the Knicks and the Hawks, where they lost in 5 with home court advantage. So obviously not a good coaching adjustment performance by Tibbs in that. And you have Monty Williams, who beat the Lakers, obviously had some injuries as well, but so far Monty Williams has done a great job in the playoffs.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, I mean, that's the moral of the story. It's the fact of the matter. There's a lot of great coaching, but there's levels to this like anything. And I think with Monty Williams, we're seeing we're seeing that level. We're seeing elite coaching for an elite team. And it's really cool to see. But I think it's about going to do it for us here tonight, man. I'd love to get into some other awards, but, we got this game coming up tonight. We got a really exciting, Nuggets Suns matchup we want to check out. So we'll leave it on that note. But I will say that, of course, we have our website that's continuously being updated. Aram here handles our cap numbers and does a lot of the numbers for our website. So that's going to be right here if you're watching this live. That's notradeclause.com. That's where you can find all our resources. We have cap sheets for all our teams, all 30 teams that we're going to be updating as we get into the offseason and free agency. A lot of different resources, cap rules page, future draft picks. I mean, whatever you can think of that, an armchair GM would want at its disposal. We pretty much had that available for you. And, I'm wearing this shirt here today, man, because I'm just really excited for Summer League. That's going to be coming up here. It's back in August, and we're all making an effort to get out there. So we're definitely going to be planning some stuff as we go to Summer League, and, that's back this year. So we have a lot of stuff planned for No Trade Clause. We're hoping to do like some of these podcasts live out there. So special guests, things like that. We have a lot of store for the podcast. We hope you guys will join us for the ride as we continue to deliver some quality content to you guys as we go through the stretch of the playoffs in the off season. So For everybody on this episode, thanks for joining me and Aram on this conversation. We definitely look forward to coming back on the mic with some more NBA analysis in the future. But until next time, guys, hope you guys enjoy your rest of your day, night here, and hope to see you again on the next podcast. So until next time, take care, everybody.